The Platinum Trophy is finally mine. Now, I will say Elden Ring has had the easiest Platinum, or even like if you're on Xbox, the 1000 gamer score. It has had the easiest completion out of all the Souls games, in my opinion. And for some reason, this one still felt just as good. Like the other ones, when you complete and find everything, you know, like you feel a sense of accomplishment, but for some reason, this one just felt very, very good. And this is the first game I platinum, because as you guys know, this is a series of mine where I do a review of the game kind of, as well as just talk about me getting the platinum. And this is the first one I've done, I think, in a year. In a whole entire year. And it's not because I don't go for achievements, but it's just I haven't found the game that really spoke to me. But this game, man, Elden Ring. Now I will say, prior to this review I'm gonna give, I am 100% biased. I mean, I love all the Souls games and even Bloodborne and all that. I don't call things Soulsborne games just because I started around the time where it was just called Souls games, so I never really added the Born part to it. But don't get me wrong, Bloodborne and Sekiro has been also like one of the top tier. Honestly, I think Sekiro's probably in my top 3, and I think Elden Ring's in my top 3 as well. I'll let you guess what other game is in that top 3. But as for Elden Ring, this game was phenomenal from the start. Literally, and there will be probably no spoilers until maybe the latter half, so I'll say, just to be safe, listen to just the audio. Maybe don't watch if you don't want to, because towards the end I'll be showing off all 3 endings, just because. And I think there's like 7 total. I accidentally did one extra one, but yes, this platinum was kind of a pain to go through, but it was the easiest pain out of all of them. Normally, like for Dark Souls, you had to literally do multiple playthroughs, and I mean, technically in this game you also have to do multiple if you choose to, but there's ways around it. I can explain that later. But this game was just, it was beautiful. One, like when you start up the game, obviously, you know, you start in that chapel of, I forgot what it was called actually, but you start off in chapel and it's all kind of bleak despair, you know, the look of Souls. But once you actually get to Limgrave and you open up that first door and you get into the open world, it just looks beautiful. It does. And I found myself for literally minutes on end, hours on end, almost days on end half the time, where I'm literally just exploring. I found myself, before I fought, because I kept watching a lot of people play Elden Ring, and every time I seen people face almost the same first boss, they face that little statue cat looking boss thing. I don't know the names of these bosses because there's literally too many for me to remember the names. If they're not the main bosses, I'm not remembering them. But I kept watching them face that same boss, and I didn't face that boss until like probably my 19th boss into the game, just because I didn't know where it was. I kept exploring. I actually went to Caelid pretty early in my game, like probably a little bit too early, because I faced the tree sentinel first, and then I immediately went far east, and lo and behold, I did feel the difficulty spike of the enemies there. I knew I wasn't supposed to be there, but I'm a stubborn man, and I wanted to find all the graces I possibly could, all the ruins, so that way towards the end game I knew that at least everything would be marked and ready to go. I'd have all the graces, and I would be able to kind of fly through, kind of like a boss rush. That's pretty much how my game went. When I was finished completely, and I got to the last boss and beat the last boss, and, you know, was prepared as, you know, you normally would do for Dark Souls. You beat the last boss, and then your choice is there from right there. And I stopped at that point and immediately just went to every single possible ruin to find every possible item there is. And it was fun. Now there's some bosses that has, you know, mirrored movesets, or just they're just mirrored of enemies you would find out in the open. Like I think the red Radagon wolf or something like that. But you can find him in I think like 3 different spots that you face him. You know, even one of the Godskin people you fight on a bridge first, and then you end up fighting him as a boss. So now don't get me wrong, the Godskin duo is a different story. That boss was something. But when it came to like finding all the armaments, or even the sorceries, incantations, and the talismans, those were a lot easier than previous Souls games. In previous Souls game, they would make sure you found everything. like literally everything, which that would mean, for like instance, there's certain things in Dark Souls 1 where after you kill it, it wouldn't, if it didn't drop its weapon, you would have to literally either have a save to where you can reload that area if it didn't drop it, or you would have to go a whole another playthrough like you just would. But in this game, you don't have to do that. However, there is one missable armament. Now, I will say, spoiler ahead for this one, because I do want to kind of warn everyone, but I'm going to come out with a video that's going to explain how I can help a lot of people that may have had this issue. But the Bolt of Gransax is a weapon and an armament that you find in the capital. Now, once you go so far, like facing Malekith, you know, I forgot what his last part of his name, I think the Black Blade or something like that. But once you beat him, that whole royal capital, that whole area pretty much is turned to ash. And if you don't explore every inch of that place before that happens, you will lose out on some items, but you will also lose out on the legendary armament, the Bolt of Gransax. Now, there is an issue with that, because if you want to try to do everything in one playthrough and get your platinum, well, the sucky part is if you missed it that one time, your only option is to either start New Game Plus and go get it, or you kind of just invade or summon people to just ask them if they have it so they can drop it for you and you drop it back. And that's kind of what I had to do. I did end up missing that weapon on my first playthrough, and it was a little frustrating, but luckily I found someone on Reddit that happened to help someone else, and they helped me, and they actually dropped me it to keep. So in the future video, I'm willing to repay the favor, not to drop it to keep, but I'm going to repay the favor to help a lot of people that may or may not want to do a New Game Plus but want the platinum. I'm just going to drop it, and hopefully they drop it back. But I'll go a lot more in depth on that, because you play a kind of interesting game when you do that, because if they don't drop it back, well, that's where my gift giving is done, because I won't have the weapon anymore. I could always play New Game Plus though and then get it. I know there's like duplication glitches and all this and that, but I haven't done that. Now, when it comes to the bosses of this game and the difficulty, you know, that's normally what scares a lot of newcomers, and there's always been this, should Dark Souls or Bloodborne or just Soulsborne games in general, should they have an easy mode? And that has always been a criticism of the games, that it's kind of like gatekeepy to the ones that played it, and it keeps out the newcomers. Well, this game is actually really great for newcomers. Now, don't get me wrong, that does not mean that this game is easy. It is far from easy. Now, I will say, like Limgrave, it's pretty simple. You know, there's some bosses that will kind of irk your nerves here and there, but once you learn their attack patterns, and that goes for the whole game, that really goes into Souls in general. But, you know, when you find a boss that you can't necessarily beat when you first meet him, go and level up. There's so many rune farms in this game that you can find, which if you don't like doing that, totally understand. Then just learn their attack pattern, because every single boss has either a cheese way to do it, or you can just learn their attack patterns and they have their openings that you can exploit, or there's just ways that you can just fight them. Now, for instance, Melania, there's like 4 different ways I've seen people fight her. There's magic. There's actually learning the attack pattern, just attacking her openings. There is a great shield, the way that I beat her. Or you can literally summon 3 people, or well, 2 people, and you guys just struggle, but you guys can actually pretty much take her down before she might heal from healing other people. Now, I will say, I think Melania was a little bit easier for me than I think most people, just for the reason I think I kind of picked up on her just moveset and realized that a shield will work well against her because of the type of weapon that she used, because when she hits a great shield, it's not going to take as much stamina. But my kind of difficulty kind of rose when it came to certain bosses that were relentless in their attack patterns, to where was like a very minimal window for opening, as well as just the 2v1 bosses like the Godskin duo, the Valiant gargoyles. Like, those were extremely annoying for me. I struggled, and even the Covenant Knights, when you had to face 2 at the same time, those were also annoying for me. Mainly, I think it was the spear one. No, yeah, it was a spear one. I could not figure out his attack pattern or the openings. Just for some reason, I couldn't figure it out. That was one that I really struggled on. But that's the cool thing about this game. Everyone is going to struggle on different bosses. Everyone's going to have a completely different playthrough. Like, there's a lot of people that I know that instead of facing the cat boss or even facing Margit the Fell or even Godric, they completely explored everything. They were facing bosses they weren't supposed to be facing. A lot of people fought the tree sentinel right off gate. Some people skipped them and waited until they were more powerful and came back. Like, there's so many different ways to attack this game, and while there is the main story that you have to kind of follow and, you know, defeat the main bosses, you don't have to do that right off the bat. You can take as long as you need. You can just, I mean, I think I heard that there's like 82 something bosses in this game. And like I said, some of them are pushovers, mainly because there's dungeons, there's legacy dungeons, there's the main bosses. I mean, there's just different. You won't really know if you're in a pushover boss area until you face the boss. Because, I mean, there's some times where I went to random dungeons and I would face a boss that was just a little bit harder than others, and then I'd face another dungeon in the like same area. It would just be its neighbor in the ruins, and I would just run past them. I would just run through them and have no struggle whatsoever. But this game, like I said, is perfect for newcomers because you can attack this game at your speed. If you get stuck, you can go level up, or you can, you know, be that stubborn Souls player and you become a part of the Souls community and you just keep playing until you beat them. Now, I will say there are some people that I noticed that, specifically Jeff, he never really was into the Souls games as much, but he mentioned in his last episode with his mage that the worst part of the Souls community is the ones that gripe about what you use when you play the game. Now, I also agree. That's one part that I think I hate seeing, like, you know, comments always about, like when someone's playing as a mage and then someone feels the need to comment on their video saying, you're taking the easy mode, and I feel like that's kind of wrong. Like, just let them play the way they want. Because for me personally, like, while I do feel like certain builds of things where you can one-shot or just cheese an enemy, I personally won't do that, but I'll never attack another person for playing that way. And I will say, when you play this game, just play it your way and don't think about what other people use or say as easy mode. Like, if you want to be a mage, because some bosses are harder when you're a mage. Like, that's just a fact, because some bosses are kind of relentless and you might not be able to, you know, cast a spell. You might need a mimic tier to kind of help distract the boss in a way, but there's some bosses that are extremely easy for melee, because I can stun a lot of bosses just by having a heavy greatsword. I use Radon's or the Star Scourge greatsword or something like that, but I used his greatsword the majority of my first playthrough, and I was staggering a ton of bosses. Now there are some bosses that are hard for that kind of build. And I mean, it just really goes to your playstyle. Some bosses you'll fly through, some bosses you won't. That's just the name of the game, and it's a fun thing to tackle. But for a newcomer, you will have fun. Just play your way, play at your pace, and you'll get through it. Now, there's a couple gripes I have with the game. Not many, like I said, I'm biased, but the one glaring gripe that everyone probably relate on is the camera and blocking. Or not blocking, locking on. Locking on is probably one of the most frustrating things in a Souls game sometimes, because if your camera is not centered on the enemy when you're turning and you press the, you know, right stick to lock on as you're turning, you'll then center your camera, but it won't lock on because the enemy wasn't fully on your screen, which will then turn your camera completely to where your character is facing, which then could screw you over again, and you'll be in a loop of pretty much rotating your camera, and it'll like snap to a different location that's not the boss. I've seen so many people complain about it, and it is an issue that has always been in Souls games and they've never fixed, but I probably don't think it's an easy way to fix it, because if you do if the enemy is just on your screen a little bit and you can lock onto him, then you run the risk of, if there's little, like mob enemies beside the boss and you try to lock on them and move your camera, you're going to lock onto him immediately. And yeah, you could flick the right stick to then go to the enemy you're trying to lock on, but still that's wasted time. That kind of almost is the exact problem we're having, where we're wasting time trying to lock on to the enemy and we are just keep snapping the camera into a different direction. So I mean, people are saying to fix it, but I feel like it's a little bit easier said than done. And I've also seen the gripe, this isn't really my gripe, but I've seen someone say the UI is kind of annoying, trying to find your items like in your, equipment spot, which I mean, there's ways. Make sure you put your most used items, put pretty much priority in front. Your Estus, maybe your summoning sign, then or even your other Estus flask, the wondrous, whatever it's called. But put the things that you use the most closest, and then when you're far away from an item that you want to use, hold down. Well, once you get to it and you want to use your Estus, instead of pressing it a billion times, just hold down. You'll go right to the front of the equipment part and you'll be able to use it right away. Every gripe has a way to get around it, other than the locking on in the camera. Like, you're just going to run into those problems regardless. But when it comes to like certain things, there's ways around, fixing the issue. While I do agree that some people's opinion, maybe they just don't like the UI at all. And we've heard from the Ubisoft, well, I shouldn't say all of Ubisoft, just some select Ubisoft and Horizon Zero Dawn, as well as I think an EA dev, have stated how, they don't like Elden Ring and it doesn't deserve the praise it's getting. That's their opinion. They're entitled to it. But I will just disagree. I think from me playing, the Demon Souls, Dark Souls, through, all the way up to Elden Ring, I've been used to the same UI forever. Now, Sekiro did change it up a little bit, but I mean, all in all, it's always been the same UI. Nothing's really changed. And you either like it or you don't. There's no really middle ground. I don't think you'll warm up to it. Maybe you'll warm up to it the more you play it, but I'm a biased person. It's hard for me to say there's nothing wrong with it when I've been playing with it so long. But they've also griped about the quest lines. Now, me personally, I love the kind of quest lines that these Soulsborne games give. You talk to an NPC, they tell you a story, they tell you, a task that they give you and your job there. And this is a problem for some people, because I mean, if it's not a matter of it's a bad thing if they don't hold your hand, but it could be a bad thing for some people because they'll tell you some vague information that you now have to remember. There's no way to have it in a hotbar somewhere in your notes. There's nothing. Like, you have to remember, if one of the NPCs, now I'm just going to make a random hypothetical, but if one NPC say I'm going north, in this area after you do this. Now you have to remember it, which could be literally hours to 10 hours later, depending on how long you take to do what they say. They all of a sudden will be north, and you will not remember that unless you put it in your head that, oh yeah, I had to go do this. Sometimes I, forgot about quest lines in this game, and I had to, or I would randomly just stumble across them like, oh, hello, what are you doing here? And then you talk and realize, oh yeah, this was the second part to your quest line. And when it comes to endings, for me, I wanted to make sure I did all 3 endings in one fell go. So what I did was, I made 3 saves as I beat the final boss, and then I went back and made sure I cleaned up every single possible quest line. And once I did, then everything was ready to go to where I could do it. But I could see how these quest lines, they're very vague. If you don't do certain things, you could mess up completely. There's things where if you summon someone and they happen to die while you summon them, they're dead for good, and then you won't be able to do their quest line at all. There's also some parts where people will hit NPCs. I mean, that part's funny, and I mean, once you make that choice, you already made your choice. You don't want to continue their quest lines, because some quest lines are almost pointless. There's some quest lines where you get absolutely nothing from them except maybe a bell bearing or just a weapon that honestly probably isn't for your build. Maybe it just really depends on how you play. But that's the cool thing. You get a quest that is not going to sit on your screen all day. You're going to get a quest that's not going to clutter up inbox on your, when you pause the game. And that's the cool thing about this game. If you want to do the quest and it intrigues you, you'll end up remembering it later and it will stick with you. If you don't want to end up doing the quest, then you just, you'll forget about it, and then might stumble across it later, and then it might intrigue you. I mean, there's just ways to play this game. And not everyone's going to agree with that way. Like, I love the way that Soulsborne games do quests, but it's not for everyone. Not everyone's going to like that, and they're entitled to that. But when it comes to this game, it was very good. I mean, the bosses, the difficulty was there that, veterans will struggle. They will have moments where they're like, man, I really got to learn this boss, because some bosses are no pushover. Now, there is a lot of bosses that are. I'd say it's almost maybe a 75-25 split. 75% of the bosses are easy, in quotes. Like, they could be easy. It just depends on what build you got, because every boss, like I said, it's going to be a different split depending on your build. 2, they're gonna, if you apply yourself, then you might have it even easier. Maybe you leveled up. Maybe you did a rune farm to where you're already over leveled for the majority of the game. Then the split might be 80-20, or 90-10. It really depends. But no matter what, the final, the last string of bosses will make you struggle. They will. Now, if you're a Soulsborne pro somehow, or just godlike at games, you might end up one trying a lot of bosses, and then the split might be 95-5. But the thing is, in all those scenarios, there is a certain split where some bosses will give you trouble. And that's a good thing, because that's the thing in Dark Souls. There will be bosses that will get on your nerves that might not have gotten on nerves of other people. Now, I would say the majority of people have had the same gripe with a certain boss called Melania. Now, you've seen her in a trailer. That boss, I've been seeing a consensus of she's the hardest boss in the history of Soulsborne games. I don't agree. However, she's no pushover whatsoever. I watched so many people be stuck on her. Some person took 10 hours to beat. Some people I've heard 500 tries. I've heard a lot of things. Now, I picked up on this great shield strat when I just happened to finally pull out a shield, because I never use shields. I always just go shieldless and just dodge. That's, I've learned from Souls games. If you came from Sekiro and you only like Sekiro, you might, or even Bloodborne, you might do a parry strategy where you always have a shield in your hand. That's not how I play, but I ended up bringing out a great shield. I don't even ever use great shields either. I'd prefer just a regular shield, but I thought about it and I'm like, she's using a kind of strike weapon that's not heavy. It didn't look like a heavy sword, so I thought maybe if I use a great shield, it'd be easier. And it does, because in her second phase, when she starts off that move where she dives at you and then explodes, and it could pretty much inflict Scarlet Rot on you, if you block it with a great shield, it actually helps you when she explodes, because it will bounce you back to the point where you're now out of the vicinity of it, so you won't even get Scarlet Rot at all. Now, the rest of the phase, that's just really up to how you play it. But it's not as bad with a great shield, I will say. It felt a lot easier. It only took me, I think, 4 tries for Melania. First try I got utterly smashed. Second try I tried to stubborn it, but then realized when I think I tried to shield with my sword and realized I'm actually shielding a lot of this. And I thought, well, what better than an actual shield that would negate most of the damage? And it worked. It helped. One of the best things about this game, though, that me personally, being extremely hype, I was setting myself up for failure if this game ended up being bad. However, seeing so many different content creators that I thought would never play a Souls game and they end up liking it, that's amazing. That gives me content to watch, but it's just amazing to see. And then also, friends of mine that I thought would never be into a Souls game, they don't like those kind of games, and they end up saying, you know what, I want to give this one a try. That goes to show that this game did it right. Now, like I said, I'm biased to this, but I do feel like this game is going to be Game of the Year depending on the releases for the rest of the year. Really, the only heavy hitter that's there is God of War Ragnarok, but I wouldn't hold my breath that it will release this year. It could, it's slated to, and it should, but I don't know. Now, there is Horizon Forbidden West that looks like a phenomenal game. And just because the developer did bring up that, Elden Ring, has a dated UX and the quest lines are bad, doesn't mean that their game isn't good. It was just one developer, probably an ex-developer too, but it was just one person's opinion. That shouldn't ruin your opinion on that said game. Horizon Forbidden West looks amazing, got great reviews. So, it's in the running for Game of the Year too. There's a lot of games this year that I've heard are really good. Like I played Seafood before this, and that was very fun. I wouldn't call that a Game of the Year contender, but it was a great game that did release. There's Wonderlands later this year. I don't think that will be a Game of the Year contender either, but I'm going to play that game a lot. But Elden Ring, I do believe right now, I mean, let's just look at the resume. Game of the Years are something that these kind of games win. It wouldn't be the first time. And it's not the first time they released a universally acclaimed game. Almost across the board are all like great scores from Metacritic as well as just user scores. Now there were problems with the PC version of this game. That's the thing that did happen, and that's just kind of what you risk when you release it on multiple consoles and PC. And that is something that needs to be deducted from points when it comes to things like if certain games release and it's just a flawless release, that's points for them. And there was a struggle with frame rate and stuff on the PC. A lot of people just struggled to play it, and that goes with also last gen consoles as well. Like they got a hindrance of performance, and that really does suck. That's not great, especially with how it's so hard to get these new consoles. I've been lucky that I have gotten both of them, but not everyone has been that lucky. But from my personal opinion alone, I do believe that Elden Ring is honestly for me a 10 out of 10 game. I could go as low as a 9.5 out of 10, and if we're doing like a 1 through 100 kind of IGN style thing, which I don't even know if they do that anymore, but I'd have to give this like a 98, but I'm giving it a 10 out of 10 just because it has been one of my favorite games in a very, very long time. It's definitely in my top 3 for favorite Soulsborne games for sure. And honestly, it's going to be my game of the year for this year. I mean, and I think in the past maybe 3 years, we've had Kingdom Hearts 3, Death Stranding, Sekiro, Last of Us Part 2, Spider-Man Miles Morales. I mean, there's been so many games that has released, and I only named a few. I named almost mostly PlayStation ones, but there's obviously some that most of them have been released on both consoles at this point, except for I think The Last of Us. Ghost of Tsushima is another one, but like so many games have been released that have been great, but none captivated me as much as this game. And I will be doing a second playthrough, and I probably will keep playing this game for a while, and I think I'm gonna try to speedrun it. I think this is the game that I might dabble in speedrunning. I did try to speedrun back in Dark Souls 1 as well as Dark Souls 2, but I never tried again. But I think I'm interested in this one. It seems like the speedrunners are already getting almost sub 30s. Probably by the time this video goes up, there might be a sub 30 speedrun. I think the lowest is like 35 or something like that at the time of making this video, probably even lower, and I didn't really look. But I mean, it's exciting. This game has achieved my hype level and honestly smashed the expectations that I've had for it. And the platinum honestly wasn't really a pain in the ass to get either. I mean, it was kind of a joy to go for, and there wasn't really anything that made me think like, oh, I don't really want to play this at the moment. I need to take a break. I just was, sucked into the world, and even in the going for achievements, like there was not a moment where I just kind of regretted my decision. The platinum was fun to go for, and I'd recommend a lot of people to also go for it because it is one of the easiest platinums to get in a Souls game history. Like in my opinion, there wasn't nothing that you were forced to. And hold on, let me say this too. The 3 endings, I suggest making a save right before the final boss, upload your save to the cloud, turn off auto sync, and then remember to reload your save before each ending. That way you can do an ending, and pretty much 3 endings in one go in the span of like probably 20 minutes. But yes, like I said, 10 out of 10 game. I enjoyed it. I loved it. And yes, I am biased, but let me know down in the comment section below your thoughts on this game. Did you love it? Did you not love it? Because you're entitled to that opinion as well. But just let me know your thoughts down below. But if you guys did enjoy this video, leave a like, subscribe, and you guys know the drill. I will see you guys later.